Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. Making a video today to hopefully make it helpful for some of you who, let's say you've gotten a vintage sewing machine. Maybe you just bought it. Maybe you bought it knowing that it was missing a part, or maybe you didn't. You got it home, you're like, hey, wait a minute, where's that piece that I see in the photos or I see in the manual? Or I see somewhere online in a video of the same exact machine and mine doesn't have it. Was it a variation in a model? Normally, if you have a machine such as, say, the White brand or the Singer brand, some brands had lots of models that sort of looked the same but had different features. Okay, you might have had a model that did not offer cam decorative stitching, but it still kind of looks like this, right? Even the straight stitch versions sort of look like this, but not exactly. They're missing certain items, obviously, for adjusting zigzag, but it's not always apparent, especially if you're either new to vintage sewing machines or maybe you're just new to that model, right? It happens to me on occasion. I get home, it's like, hey, wait a minute. So I wanted to mention to you guys today that what if you have something like this, and this machine that you're looking at that I've finished restoration on, it's getting listed today. I've already done the debut video for it and so forth, but it occurred to me that I wanted to showcase something that might be of use to you guys. Sometimes if a machine is missing a part entirely and you need that part for it to function, you're going to have to do a search and find that part. Okay, for example, if your machine is missing its check spring in the tension assembly, you're going to need something in place of that. You're going to need another check spring or you're going to have issues, right? But sometimes the thing that is missing, maybe it's the lens cover for a light bulb, which this one is not missing that, but you know, that's an example. You can still use it. You just have to be, well, you always have to be careful around, incandescent bulbs. They get really hot, but it wouldn't stop you from sewing with the machine, right? So when I got this machine, I knew, because I've seen enough of these models to know that this particular model came with needle position adjustment. And when I got the machine, in fact, I think I may, you guys can, if you go back and look at my video when I first said, hey, here's a purchasing video, which will come up. I have made public the debut video for this machine because I'm listing it now and I want people who are looking at it to be able to see the video of it running. But as I unfold more videos that involve the White 565 model, which you see right here, then if you go back and you look at those earlier videos, you'll notice that this little white piece here is not there. Now, when I got the machine, what I saw was essentially a bolt with, we'll call it a bolt, with threads on it. And I'll hold this up, see if we can get it. This one's a little darker than what the machine actually had. So I'm not sure, see if this is even going to come up. There we go. You guys see the threads on this, right? Now it was more silver and less black looking. This one is, this is a bolt I pulled out of I have a box I keep old bolts and screws in, and what was facing me was essentially this bolt, this type of bolt about this size was sticking out, and I could move it. You know, I could actually, I could push and move the needle position. That was great. I was like, oh, I'm glad that works. And you know, I had to clean and lubricate it, but it wasn't frozen, thankfully. But there was something missing, and Whites from this year range, early 60s, they had on the end of that bolt was basically what looked like a chrome ball. Okay, it might look more like something like this, not exactly, but if I zoom in here, you guys can see. But it was more like the shape of a ball, and it was almost like an acorn nut, and it would, screw onto the bolt up here. I'm pointing to this here. It would screw onto the bolt, and what's really cool is that it was actually designed to be, screwed on and off, I guess, because you'd have to take the little round piece off if you had to get this plate off, because you have access screws right here where you can remove the plate. So kudos to White for doing that. But anyway, it had gone missing. I'm sure somebody over the years, it got loosened and then it fell off, and who knows, it's part of that, you know, the missing file things, the place where all of our lost items show up someday maybe. But anyway, it wasn't here. So I did a search, and I went to eBay, I went to Etsy, I went to Bonanza, I went to a few other sites that might have some used parts, and I found nothing. Now, it's possible I would have eventually found that part, but let's say you're in the same situation, you're like, well, okay, like I say, you can use the needle position. You can use the needle position control, right? And it was fine, but you'd be touching the threads with your fingers, and you know, I might never find that part. And it could be that my client who purchases this may not have any desire to go hunting for that part. They just want to sew, and they need a machine that they can rely on, and they might have just said, well, okay, fine, no big deal. It's just the end of the needle position control lever, which is what that little knob functioned as. Well, with the knob gone and me not being able to find one, this is a good example of how you can make something work for you. Now, I started looking around thinking, okay, geez, I didn't have any acorn nuts. An acorn nut kind of looks like a half of an eggshell a little bit with threads on it. And I'm like, well, that would be aesthetically looking the same, but then I would have to make sure I got the same threads, and I didn't really want to delay that. And I thought, well, that might work, but that's not as actually totally smooth. Acorn nuts have a few they can have some rough edges. And I thought, well, what do I have? So I went looking around, and here's the top of a bottle. This is an automotive lubricant thing that I bought. And this cap is a cap, and there's no threads on it. It's a cap, and I thought, well, that might work. It's a little too wide. And what else? I was looking at different things. Sometimes you can take, depending on what you have. This is a box of I've got basically wire nuts in here, right? And they have threads, so I could potentially use a wire nut, right? And I even have some in here with, again, they have metal threads on the inside. The wire nut itself is plastic, but on the inside are threads, and those are used to help grip wires when you're tying them together. Oh, well, that could possibly work. And, it's gray. It would work okay. And then I remembered I had this. Now, this was, I'm going to zoom in here for you. Some of you may recognize it. This was a plastic cap to an old oil bottle, probably a sewing machine oil bottle, or who knows what I originally got it from. In any case, it may be something that was left over in one of the sewing tables I sometimes come across in my travels. But the point here is that I was able to find something that had threads on the inside, and it's white, and it actually this is sort of a two-tone turquoise, but in the 50s and 60s you saw white used as a accent color for a lot of two-toned items. So what I did was I made sure that I cleaned with 99% alcohol, clean the bolt, and get any oil or grease off of it, because oil and grease do not play well with glue. And then I had to decide, okay, I can turn it and I might get the threads to match, and I think the threads actually did match. That was just dumb luck there. But I didn't want to just do that. So I wanted to make it more permanent, and I needed an adhesive. So like, okay, well, what are you going to do there? What kind of adhesive would work? And so I ended up putting a dollop of this on there. Now, this is an adhesive. I don't often use it for sewing machines. It's actually something I bought because a part of the door trim on my car had come loose, because when your car leaves the factory, they basically use a lot of adhesives on modern cars to get all the trim and the crap that they put on top of the paint to get it to stick. And I've been very impressed with the performance of this, because I've glued things that have been on my car, like a door protective strip, for example. And this stuff, it dries, but it stays pliable. And so in spite of the extreme temperature changes we get through the seasons, it's held up quite well. I would say it's probably, equal of the quality that they use in the car factories. Anyway, so I went, and I remembered I had this, and it didn't take much, and I followed the remember, read the directions, because all glues, you know, it's just like paint. You think, oh, paint, why do I need directions? No, you really should look at them. This, you know, it told me to put the glue on one side, join the materials for, I think it said 10 seconds, and then pull it off and give it a chance, give it 15 seconds or something like that. And then I went back and I turned this, I screwed it down with the threads and the glue. And once I got it snug, I left it overnight, and it's a pretty, I consider it a pretty permanent repair. If you had to, you could probably work this off and find a replacement. But this is a smooth, this little cap that I have added here is very smooth. It's comfortable to touch. It's not going to dig into your fingers like the threads would. And and from an aesthetic point of view, which is totally subjective, some of you may say, oh, that looks terrible, and maybe you're right. But honestly, given the overall aesthetic and the fact that white was often used, if you look at automobiles from the 50s, you'll often see either black, white, or both used in combination with a color, right? They even had tritone. They had three-tone. Some maybe even had more than that. But two-tone color combinations were really popular in all sorts of items, everything from, you know, bowling shoes to cars to sewing machines. And I think, you know, from an aesthetic point of view, I'm happy with the way this turned out. I could have used one of the wire nuts, but you know, the colors did not complement as well. Totally subjective, has nothing to do with the function of the machine. But again, I wanted you guys to see this because some of you may have machines where everything's not perfect. And you think, well, darn, you know, I want a cover to my needle position lever. Something like this which is really a comfort aesthetic thing. You could have still used it without this, but that is an example of how we can, you know, you can make things work for you, and essentially it's fine. Right? It's really not that much different than the bobbin tire. You know, I had to put a new bobbin tire on this machine, and that's a fairly common need for many of these machines because the rubber's often more than a half century old, and rubber, you know, it degrades. It's not an inert material, and it breaks down over time. It's exposed to oxygen and, you know, atmospheric whatever. And so the original was white, or actually it may have been more like a powder blue or white, and I can't find the white ones, but I can find the black ones. We really need our bobbin tires to work well. So this one is in black, but that's okay because it's going to function. You know, you can see it turns beautifully here. It's going to function great as a bobbin winding tire. Would it be nice to have a white tire? Oh yeah, sort of, but that's not what we're doing here. We're not going to be displaying this machine in a museum. We're actually wanting to use it as a working tool for sewing, and they are so incredible because very few, honest to God, of any of the home sewing machines I've ever restored have been worn. Occasionally, but that's, you know, they were used intermittently, even going way back. People sewed a lot, but they didn't sew the way they do with industrial machines. That's why I've mentioned to those of you before who were looking for industrials, you really have to investigate whether there are worn parts, because a lot of times you have to replace parts on industrial sewing machines because they have just simply worn out from all the hours of use. That's not common at all with home machines. Most of the significant time, the hours that I invest in these machines, is either undoing problems that they've had because a prior owner didn't know, you know, they had to deal with thread jams or what have you. And a lot of it is when I talk about waking up these machines, getting all the old goop out, all the old oxidized oils and grease out, and then replacing with new, and then getting them unfrozen, and then also occasionally having to replace a part like a check spring or a light bulb or something like that. So a lot of the time that is required for restoring a sewing machine is very often just taking it section by section because it's a real machine with metal on metal, and machines don't really like to sit. They like to run. They're really happiest and they're maintained well when they're being used. And again, I'm referring to home sewing machines here. But anyway, this was an example of something I've never really talked about before, which is what do you do when you can't find a part? The machine will still function, but I want it to look finished. And this is an example, and I just happen to have this on hand. Like I said, I could have waited months and months looking for this, but my plan is not to do that. I think that would be an unwise use of time, because I'm getting a number of requests from people. Do you have any machines? We really, we need machines. We want to sew. We want to sew. We have time at home to sew. We want to sew masks and all sorts of other items. So this video is really to help those of you who are in a situation like this, where it doesn't determine the function of the machine, but maybe you're frustrated or you're disappointed. You got a machine. It's okay. You can use this and make it work, right? Just like with the black bobbin tire. This is a great tire. It fits perfectly. It's the right size. It's the right material. It's going to function beautifully. And if I could find a white one, yeah, I would probably do that, just because I love things going back as stock as possible. But again, ask yourself, are you restoring a machine that was made in the 1850s, and there's 3 of them left on the planet, and it's going into a museum, or you're a fine collector? That's a very different story. You wouldn't do this necessarily. But this machine is magnificent. It's heirloom quality. It's vintage. They were made in large numbers. This is not a rare machine. And you guys know I very seldom ever use the word rare. You don't hear that come out of my mouth often, because most of the machines I work on are not. They may look rare to some people because they've never seen them, but there are a lot of them out there. What is rare and unusual is to find one that has been gone through. And that's one of the primary things that my clients come to me for. They're like, you know what? I don't really have the time or inclination to go through this machine. I really have a project I want to sew. I'd like to get an old machine or a vintage machine because I know how well built they are, but they're also old and I don't know the condition. And so that's the primary thing that drives us. So overall, let me know what you guys think. Get down in the comments. Do you think this makes sense? Do you think I should just leave, should these be bolts like this be left uncovered? And what would you use? Maybe you have even better ideas of what you might use. The overall point here is to say, don't be afraid to take items that are not essential for the overall functioning of the machine. And if you need to, you can improvise. Okay? You can find something, make it work, and the whole purpose of that is so your machine functions and you're happy using it. Thanks for watching, everyone. We've got cloudy day today, but not a bad amount of light. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk to you folks about, I don't know if you'd call this an upgrade so much as a retrofit. Maybe we're going to retrofit this machine. But anyway, let me know your thoughts down there below, guys, and we will see you in the next video.